Hi, my name is Reverend Stephen Milton, and today I want to talk about the problem with feeling superior. I do this because this week we are remembering the victims of the residential school system, a system that was run by Christian churches. I'm a Christian minister. I'm part of the United Church of Canada, and we ran 15 residential schools. And lots of people wonder, well, how could churches of all people, of all institutions, be involved in this? Aren't we supposed to be loving and kind? And yet these institutions, these schools were responsible for traumatizing Indigenous people for generations. Thousands have died, many of whom are only now being discovered in unmarked graves. And people who managed to survive the residential school system went back to their communities traumatized and often unable to speak their languages. And all of this because churches got involved to try and teach these children. What happened? Well, the problem is that churches, for a very long time, for many, many centuries, had got this idea into their heads that as Christians, we are superior to all other faiths and all other cultures. Christians believe that God came down and became a human being in the form of Jesus of Nazareth. And because we follow Jesus, that was interpreted as meaning that we must have the best revelation of all, superior to all other faiths. And so Christianity was better than all other faiths. This idea of superiority, of course, led to centuries of conquering other cultures and other faiths and declaring people who didn't believe the way we believe to be heretics and often meeting deadly punishments as a result. And so in the late 19th century, when the Canadian federal government said that they wanted to take children away from their families on their reserves and take them far away to go to boarding schools called residential schools, and would churches be willing to run the schools, we leapt at the chance. We already believed that we were superior to everybody else, and of course we were superior to Indigenous people who were considered by the culture at large to be inferior. And so churches went about acting like superiors, people who believed that they had all the right answers, with tragic, horrible consequences. What is so ironic and paradoxical and tragic about this is that if you actually crack open the Bible and you read what Jesus says and see what he did, he wasn't preaching superiority. One day on the road, a bunch of his disciples get into an argument, and Jesus stops them and he says, what were you guys arguing about? And they say, well, we're wondering which one of us is the best disciple. And Jesus takes them aside and says, you're not getting this. If you really want to be on God's path, you have to give up that whole idea of superiority. The last will be first. It's the servant who's the most important. Not because they earn brownie points by being a servant, but because God's will flows through them once they realize that they are not self-important. That lesson, that to serve, not to conquer, is the key to walking on God's path. That got lost by Christians. There have always been a minority of Christians who believed it, but others just wanted to be in charge, wanted to be on top. And that's what led to the residential school system. Christianity is at a low ebb right now. Not many people go to church on Sundays, and maybe that's just what has to happen right now for Christianity to survive. Because if Christianity continues to believe that it's superior, we're always going to be off the path that Jesus wanted us to be on. Maybe this period of being humbled is absolutely what we need as Christians, so that we can reorient ourselves and realize that we are not the only faith, we're not the only ones who matter here, that there's multiple ways in which God has been expressing God's understanding of the world and how we should live in it. That Indigenous culture is highly important, a precious revelation on its own. And so we should be cooperating and listening rather than trying to conquer and stamp out. So this week, as we wear orange shirts and we celebrate on September 30th, National Truth and Reconciliation Day, I invite all Christians to remember we were never supposed to be the greatest. If anything, we were just supposed to be humble. That's all that we were asked to do. Be humble and listen for that quiet voice of God. It's often a whisper. And we'll suggest that we do things which may not seem to make a lot of sense to us. But if we follow God's path, we'll find that it's always a path of love. And if for some reason we head down a path where it seems as though our job is to conquer others and be superior to them, then we can be certain that that was not the voice of God that we heard. Thank you for listening.